Welcome everyone, or welcome back to week 3 of Water and Communications. I'm so excited that we've seen so many engagements and connections already for the first 2 weeks. So really excited for this third week. As you know, the Water and Communications program is made possible by the Grundfos Foundation. Before we jump into the panel, I just wanted to remind you of the interpretation. We have interpreters today. Whichever language you want to hear us from, please select at the bottom of your screen. You have the interpretation that should be a globe icon, or it can also be located under more. And then you can choose English, Spanish, or Arabic. That way we can hear each other in whichever language that is most comfortable for us. If you have any issue with the interpretation, please leave us a message in the chat and Shay or myself will help you. A quick reminder that the recordings for weeks 1 and 2 are ready on the Water and Communications playlists in the World Water Week YouTube channel in Spanish, Arabic, and English. So feel free to share that with your friends and colleagues, spread the word around. And I've sent the link to you on Friday, but if you need the link again, it will be pasted in the chat as well. And a quick announcement, you should have received it via email on Friday, but if not, here is a reminder for you. We have an additional session on the 14th of August, where you will be presenting your work. You'll have the opportunity to present your work. So we're looking for projects or stories about water and communications, of course, that call for collaboration, ideas, input, solutions to challenges. And we will select 5 or 6 of you to present for 5 minutes. And then after that, the 5 or 6 of you will be placed in breakout rooms where you can discuss your ideas and solutions and local context with others. So we're really hoping to bring up peer learning and networking and connections. In order for you to submit your stories, we have a submission form. Again, the link will be in the chat or will be shared with you, has been shared with you via email and will be pasted in the chat. We also have a WhatsApp group that was organized and managed by participants. So that's a self-organized WhatsApp group, and I'm really grateful for whoever created it. Sorry, I forgot your name. I think that's Mohammed. But yeah, you're free to join if you're interested. There's we share tips and events and something like that in the chat, in the WhatsApp chat. So we'll paste the link as well in the chat. That's it for me right now. Before we jump into the program per se, I just wanted to acknowledge the difficult geopolitical context that in many parts of the world at different levels that brings different levels of pain and anxiety and uncertainty for many of us. So I wanted to simply express my solidarity with all of you impacted. If you need anything, please share it with me as well, and we'll do what we can to help. With that, let me open for today's panel that reflects on global solidarity and action as well. And for that, I will welcome Makaśa Looking Horse. She has set this panel today, and she will be moderating the discussion. Makaśa was born on Six Nations territory in Canada, and she's Mohawk and Lakota. She has campaigned to secure clean drinking water for her community and has held roles as Indigenous Restoration Coordinator at McMaster University and youth leader with Oneganos, a community-led water research initiative. Makaśa also created the award-winning podcast, Let's Water Talk. We'll share the link in the chat as well. and she has led major advocacy efforts, including delivering cease and desist orders to Nestlé. Makaśa continues to bridge Indigenous knowledge with climate action. Makaśa, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Sego Makaśa Looking Horse. Six Nations Native Ageno, Wakatahuni. Super happy to be here and hosting this panel session with a few very amazing women and one of the most, impactful women that I have in my life. So I'm excited for you to hear their voices and yeah, and I'm super excited to host them as well. So first we have Tina Nata. She is a mother of two from the East Coast of, I don't want to say it wrong, New Zealand. Her work involves advocacy for environmental, Indigenous, and human rights. This includes local, national, and international initiatives that highlight the role of settler colonialism in issues such as climate change and waste pollution, and promotes Indigenous conservation as best practice for globally sustainable future. And then we have Judy De Silva. She is a Grassy Narrows community member. She is also a mother of five children, and they help her to have a positive energy to continue to look for justice and for the solution to the mercury poisoning of their river system in Grassy Narrows and Mother Earth. She recently was awarded the Michael Settler Peace Prize in Germany and Human Rights Watch Award in Toronto. Art Manual Environmental Award and Wilfrid Laurier Honorary Doctorate in recognition of her lifelong work to advocate for her community members for environmental protection. Using peaceful, nonviolent, direct actions, Judy suffers from side effects of the mercury poisoning. She also works at the band office of her community as an environmental health coordinator. And thirdly, we have Dr. Dawn Martin-Hill. Dr. Dawn is a Mohawk Wolf woman, and she resides with her family at Six Nations, the Grand River. She was the first Indigenous cultural anthropologist in Canada and continues to break barriers in education and research. She founded the Indigenous Studies program at McMaster University as a master's student in 1992. She was also the first Indigenous recipient of the Canada's U.S. Fulbright Award. Supporting her work of elders across Turtle Island, her primary focus over 3 decades is working with the environment for health, water, women, and youth. Her primary research is Indigenous ways of knowing, utility, and resolving real-world issues such as access to clean water. She developed Indigenous pedagogy and methodologies, championing community-led co-creation, tech, traditional ecological knowledge, and STEM research. She also led over 8 interdisciplinary teams co-producing holistic assessments of community wellness, water access, and environmental justice, and addressing assessments of the community wellness, water access, and improving ecosystem health and impacts on quality of life. And you can learn more about the Onigenos and all of the work happening at onigenos.com, and that's where all of the research is. Not all of it, but maybe 10 years worth. So yeah, I'm super excited to have their voices highlighted today, and we're going to have a question period at 9 o'clock. So we can start questions then, but for now, we're just going to listen to their voices. So first off, I'd like to ask our first question to Tina. And so Tina, how do you see the relationship between water rights and treaty rights in your region? And in what ways has colonial power contributed to ongoing water injustices?
Kia ora tēnā koutou. Thank you, first of all, for the invite. I'm really honored to be able to sit and spend some time and chat with you about these issues. I am from, as Makaśa said, I'm from Te Ika a Maui, and we're a water nation. We're in the colonial name is the Pacific Ocean, but it's Te Moana Nui a Kiwa. And so we're a broad water nation. And we share languages across vast spaces of water, and it's a central part of our world, really. And so, for us, I think when you think about the treaty issues, and particularly in relation to water injustice, what we try to do here now is we look beyond what we're seeing in front of us. We need to tend to that, but really trying to get into the mindset that gives people a sense of entitlement to extract from the sacred and to not see the sacred or not recognize the sacredness of water. And so it's a decolonization journey, of course, but it's really around understanding where that mindset came from and the history of it, so that we can start to dismantle it. And our ancestors saw it, and in some cases our ancestors entered into treaties with the specific purpose to protect those waters, protect its sacredness, protect the sacredness of our relationship to those waters. And of course, many of those treaties have come to be breached and violated over time, but they really are blueprints for what the expectation of the people of those waters held. And so honoring those treaties with those expectations that the sacredness of these things and our relationships to them are respected. And this means also, within today's context, our authority in relation to them. So when you understand that 500-year history, you'll see how power has positioned itself in spaces. Colonial power has been able to position itself in those spaces to facilitate that extraction and the desanctification of those waters as well, and maintaining the power over those waters. And so decolonizing those systems of power that sit around our waters and our lands and our people is really necessary to be able to put in place systems of care that are long-standing.
Thank you for sharing that. It really started a long time ago, and since colonialism, this really, I guess that's when it started, and really hasn't stopped. Colonialism hasn't really stopped at all when we talk about treaty rights and water rights. So could you share when you first started seeing you personally water injustice in New Zealand, and what did you do after to take action?
Okay, so yeah, sure. So New Zealand is the colonial construct, a nation state that's determined by, a border that's however many nautical miles from the shoreline. And that border was never ours, right? That was a colonially imposed border. And so in terms of where I am located from my perspective, I am at home in Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, which is our Pacific region, which extends far beyond that space. So because we are water people from this vast water nation, we carry from birth an intergenerational deep connection to our waters that surround us. Our water is not seen as a border. It's seen as a highway. It connects us. It's our food cupboard. It's our church. It's our sacred space, and it's our ancestor. And so I think I recall, I grew up always having that level of connection. And then I think I probably would have been about 10 or 11 at one point when I saw a lot of fishing boats, like commercial fishing boats, starting to come into shore. And the life that we lived then of very much high levels of subsistence and being able to go, I was 5 years old and I was going out and getting shellfish from the shoreline, and all of these things started to dwindle because of these fishing boats. And I think that was one of the first times I was going, how can these things come along and change our world, change how we lived? So I think that was my first sense of injustice around our waters.
And I think we have all experienced like water injustice and have been affected personally from a very young age. So Judy, could you share about what you've seen happening in Grassy Narrows for as long as you could remember?
Okay, bonjour, I'm Judy De Silva from Grassy Narrows. I wanted to give the people an idea of where we live. So, like in the north, well, what they call Turtle Island, they call it. We're in the center of Turtle Island, and where I live, they call it Land of 10,000 Lakes. And they say it holds like 20% of the Earth's fresh water. So, like in my life as a child, my late dad and my late mom were fisher people, and the whole community were fishermen, like fisher people. The English Wabago River system was our lifeline. It was our highway, and everybody had boats. And my mom was a super operator of the waterways, and my dad would go off to training for months at a time. So my mom had to navigate the water while she had little kids. So for us, for me as a child, the water was always like very central in our lives, especially where we live was like we would just get water down the lake with using buckets. And even in the winter, in the freezing cold, when the lake was covered in ice, we have to make a hole in the ice. And even if you're freezing cold, you go get the water from the lake. So that's how my childhood was that I guess also that connection to being able to be alive because of water. And it was so simple as that. It was like either you go get the water or you don't get the water to drink, like that. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it's really devastating of what has been happening in Grassy Narrows, and I think that aligns with what is not only happening in Grassy Narrows but also happening within Canada. There's so many. I don't think a lot of people know within Canada that there's almost every single reserve is having Indigenous or water issues and lack of water access. Dr. Dawn, would you mind sharing what's happening about the water crisis happening in First Nations Reserve across Canada right now?
Sure. Thank you. Again, I'm honored to be here, especially with luminaries such as Judy De Silva, who's been advocating most of her life, trying to raise awareness around the mercury poisoning her community has suffered immensely from, which causes neurological damage in well-documented cases. And Tina, who I've had the luxury of being on a traditional waka with her in New Zealand while they were trying to stop the dredging that I believe some European countries were doing in their ocean, which was killing their whales. So many of our women are on the front lines trying to advocate for access to clean water, but more importantly, to keep the source water clean, I think is the better way to say it. So if you, in our studies and going across Canada, Ontario, which is a part of the Great Lakes, if anybody's familiar, that's the third largest body of fresh water in the world. So you're talking to Indigenous people who have lived in partnership with deep respect for the Great Lakes. It's a part of our people, the Mohawks, creation story, and how the Creator made this water specifically for humans to drink, because at the time we arrived from our creation story, there was only ocean water. So there's a deep, deep connection to our waters. And so when you think about, here's the largest body of fresh water, and partly in the world, one of the largest. And within 150 years in Canada, you had over 120 communities, which is over the majority of First Nations reserves, as they call them, places where we were relocated to, because the thought was we're not going to survive into the century that we're now in. So, but we're here. And one of the things that is stunning is to think that it's only on these spaces called reserves that there is no access to clean drinking water. You have communities near Judy that have a 25-year-old who has never been able to use the tap water. It's not only a boiled water advisory, it is no access, do not touch. That's how contaminated many First Nations waters are. And the question is, how is it that we only have less than 1% of our original land? We're reduced to tiny dots, and yet we're the ones and the only ones in Canada who do not have access to clean drinking water. And we've been fighting to protect the source water. So while the Trudeau government made a commitment to end boiled water advisories, they did not. Communities such as mine at Six Nations, our Grand River is one of the most polluted rivers, and where Six Nations boundaries are, there's dams on each side, and they dredged deeply along the border of our reserve, and the dams keep the waste that comes from the 25 waste treatment plants upstream, including some of the Agent Orange that was used in the Vietnam War. The majority of it was made just upstream from us when there were no environmental laws. So we have serious problems as Indigenous people in Canada with our source water. Start there, similar to Judy, where there was mercury poisoning. They knew it, they understood it, but the government refused to acknowledge it. So we're talking about decades and decades of neglect, of inequality and injustice. On top of, for example, Six Nations water not being drinkable, if you will, our wells were deemed contaminated, our well water. So one of the issues, that we're facing, and that Makaśa specifically took on and took action on, was that the province of Ontario, the premier, gave leases to Nestle and then Blue Triton to take 3.6 million liters of water a day from our aquifer, which we can't access. So these are things that are complicated. They're related to colonialism, to injustice, to environmental racism, and we have no capabilities, if you will, resources to really mount a campaign and a fight. And it relies on women such as Judy and many other amazing women across Canada who have taken the lead in raising awareness about this issue and trying to resolve it. Six Nations is a very well-off reserve. Like we are highly educated. We have dozens and dozens of PhDs, lawyers, doctors. But if you live on this reserve, you will not have access to clean water. You have to purchase your water. It's $130, and I usually purchase twice a month. So the idea that we get things for free is a stereotypical myth. And we also have to pay for our waste to be hauled away. That's $92 a month. So you're talking about almost $400 a month for families just to have access to what right across the road from us, non-natives have clean water coming out of their taps. that's the fundamental issue that we're trying to address. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's really, I think, yeah, the system itself needs to change, and in fighting water corporations as well, on top of trying to provide and have water to be accessible in your household, it really shouldn't be happening when we have so much clean fresh water. Well, I won't say totally clean, but we have the Five-Finger Great Lakes. Like, we are water rich, freshwater rich. So why is this happening in a country that has so much fresh water, yet all the Indigenous peoples who reside in Canada go without any clean water at all? And yeah, it's very, very frustrating. And I think that's one of the things that we need to bring to light here as well. I want to add, the extraction water extraction companies as well are making millions and millions and billions really off of the water and selling it globally. So it's really a huge issue, and water is really, in my eyes, more important than oil and more important than gold, because once that water is gone from the earth, then it's gone forever. And that's less water for future generations, and that's less water for us. And it's really gone. Like, there's no more finding it anywhere else. So it's really a huge issue, and it's super alarming. And that's why that's why I pressured Nestle to give our water back and stop extracting from our waterways. And I think it's super important not only to hold the government accountable to have those water companies to stop and to help Indigenous communities within Canada, but also to hold the water extraction companies accountable as well, because they're selling it and they think that water isn't a human right. So when you think that these big companies who are extracting don't think that water is even a human right, is very alarming. So it's very scary of what's happening. But I think, one thing that can give us all hope is us working together in our youth and our community, and that's how we find our strength as a collective globally, and how we can really help each other. So when we talk about our youth, because I really like to highlight Indigenous youth voices, Judy, I'd like to ask you, what role do you see the youth playing for the future of water protection, either in your community or in Canada?
I think I wanted to show a short video if I had time, but it was show how the young people been instrumental in the movement to protect water in Grassy Narrows. And one of the things I wanted to say too is because of the so-called green energy, green cars, green whatever, to make it green, it comes from minerals and resource extraction in our territories, and to extract these minerals or to bury the nuclear waste or to dig out that gold, it all takes water. And you look at Canada and you look at I think they call it it's the lights of the world, and then you look at where all the lights are in the world is Toronto, it's a big floodlight, and then you go towards my area, it's pitch black. And so Canada looks pretty dark, not very many lights, but at the same time, it is targeted as for the world is the mineral extraction. And I think the young people that are growing up right now, they have a lot on their hands, to protect that water. And so when we come to Toronto and we do protests, it's like 90% young people that come, and the older people that have passed away in Grassy or that are still alive, they pretty much gave up. Like, they don't want to fight no more. So it's these young people, it falls on their lap. And if once we do show that video, you'll see like how strong those young people are, and it's like in their hearts. It's kind of like what you do, Makaśa. Like, it's just like a fight or a force that's inside your heart that keeps pushing you to protect the water. And I feel like it's the voice of the ancestors that pushes you all young people to have that voice and to get justice for our people, to protect that water.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's like what also gives us all energy and all energizes us to continue to do the work that we do, because it's definitely extremely sometimes patronizing and hard, and there's so many obstacles, and dealing with colonialism is so extremely hard mentally, physically, emotionally. To be an Indigenous woman really is, and fighting it in everyday life, fighting for water and fighting to have your voice heard, and fighting for the youth to have a future is really can be tiring on your mental health. But seeing, I think that's like the spark and the magic is just then like going to see like your nieces or nephews, or going to a community event and seeing all of them run around, and not really having that care at that age, to to be young and to live a life you want, a good life for them, and to take on those issues and be their voices when they're really too young to be able to have a voice of their future. But I mean, the older ones definitely do, and they're really just so passionate, and I just love working with youth. So when we go back to, I guess, to the global, going back from community perspective to back to the, I guess, the global perspective, and how we can like all work together and help each other. Well, maybe first I'll go back to Indigenous water governance, and like what does that look like, and what can that look like between all of us, or just in Canada. And Dawn, would you like to answer this question? And it's, if you could reimagine Indigenous water governance system rooted in Indigenous principles, Indigenous ways of being, what would it look like?
That's a big question. I think Tina's the lawyer, but I'll try to answer. So our people have something called the Great Law. It's older than Canada. It's older than the US. It's older than colonialism. It's 900 or more years old. And in our law, as Haudenosaunee people who have been here since time immemorial, our laws are all ecocentric. In other words, our laws are about our responsibility to the natural world and upholding those responsibilities. It's not about our individual right, but it's about our responsibility. And I think that's the shift that the globe really needs. We also have one of the oldest speeches, and our schools do this to this day. Our radio stations, we open all our meetings with something called the words before all else. And it's interpreted as a Thanksgiving address. It can go on for 2 hours. We shorten it for meetings, and and public gatherings, but every child has to say this in the morning, recite Ganyohanyo in our schools. And all we do is give thanks. And we have a fairly large section about water, giving thanks to the water for giving us life, for giving all life on this planet. So we talk about every pond, the air, the rain, all of these things are almost interpreted or understood as holy or cherished. So imagine if the globe joined in on the Ganyohanyo thinking, where it's about giving thanks, or the great law, which are responsibilities to the earth, to the water, which is the life giver, our sustenance. So we are different from our neighbors right across the road. We're very urban reserve here. And the mindset is so different for our people because of these traditions, which are our laws, or what people would call natural law. They're the most ancient laws that our people still have held on to this day. So when we talk about governance, if we were to reimagine, it would be the great law. That would be the constitution of this country, which would be about protecting the faces yet to come. It's in our law to think about the seventh generation. So when the leaders get together and they're going to debate their original democracy, children had rights, women had power. Like, we don't need to change anything in our great law. But if we were talking about those things, that the great law asserts, responsibilities, but it also talks about our need to think about the actions of today and how is that going to impact the seventh generation. Imagine if leadership thought that way. This action that this decision, whether it's war, going to war, whether it's, entering into trade or economics, which we had a thriving society and economy prior to contact. What they teach people is utter garbage. Anything you have probably learned from the West about Indigenous people is practically garbage. It's made up. They're even in anthropology. I'm an anthropologist. That was all part of the colonizing thinking, was to get people to think we had nothing but bows and arrows rather than cities larger than Paris. But we had irrigation. We had all of these infrastructures built that were sustainable, or what people today would call green. We harmed very little in order to thrive, even in the larger settlements of 20,000 or more when Europeans landed here. So just saying our laws are older than this country, and it's time the globe recognized that there were people here, there were civilizations, nations who had laws, upheld those laws, entered into treaty. We entered into treaty with Anishinaabe, which is what Judy is, and we had relationships. And the oldest treaty that was made with the Europeans was made with the Dutch. That's the first treaty that was ever made in that era of the 1600s. And it's called the Turo, or the Gaswenta. And it literally says, we will travel down the river of life in our canoe with our laws, our ways of being, our thinking. You and your ship, you stay in your boat, you do your laws, but we'll coexist peacefully traveling down the river of life. Obviously, later with the British, later with Canada, but they've never honored their role of upholding each other's positive existence. And I think those are already in place. The Crown already agreed to these. They just need to begin acknowledging that there is the law of the land and it is our laws. That's what I would reimagine. Honor the treaties.
Tina, do you have anything to add to that?
What Dawn said, and for us, particularly being coastal people, one of the things around Indigenous governance is that we look at the well-being of the river is really best indicated by the quality of the water as the water enters into the ocean. Mm-hmm. And so this understanding creates necessarily a relationship between the communities along that river catchment, so that when the people at the end of the river catchment by the ocean are saying something's going on, then you need those relationships to be able to track up to what's happening along the river. And so our sacred river is called Waipu, and her other, her full, or one of her full names is Waipu Koka Huhua, which means the Waipu of many mothers, which is because we are a matriarchal people. Each mother that refers to is a different community. And I'd say the matriarchal aspect of our communities plays very strongly into our roles as water people as well. And so for me, that Indigenous approach to governance is one that is deeply connected to relationship. And it's a big difference to the way in which conservation, Western conservation, tends to look at things in units. That, you know, even the categorization system is an individualizing one. And so it might look at the well-being of something and the well-being of the thing next to that, but the well-being of the relationship, the interconnected relationships of all those parts are not as well measured under Western systems. When for our Indigenous perspective, relationships are everything. It's all about the strength of the relationships. And so deepening our relationship and being in deep relationship to the waterway or the water body that you are charged to look after or that you live next to or by, it's a part of Indigenous governance. You have to maintain that relationship. And that also becomes a part of our monitoring. So when we take our youth out and when we go out, understanding the decisions that need to be made for that river or that part of the coastline means you need to be able to hear it when it's telling and what it's telling you. And it has a voice, and that voice consists of which species are present and which species are no longer present, and the taste of it and the smell of it and its character and its relationship to the other part, what is growing around it. All of these different things collectively will create a voice that will tell you what's going on in that river system or water system. And so we try to exercise all of our senses and be mindful of how this eel tastes. And when I gutted that eel, how healthy was its liver? I pay attention to those different, you pay attention to these different things. And so that is collective, all of those, like, science, forms of science are also seen as a voice of the water to you to tell you, this is the decision I need to be made for my well-being.
Yes, and it's holistically, and it's the yeah, I see how that the water, because everything survives with water and can't survive without it, so water can speak through those things and how healthy it is, and including people, and I think like that we need to definitely pay attention and listen to the water, listen to the birds and just the wildlife around it. Like you said, like the fish, especially, the fish are like the main source, main tellers, as well as all the aquatic life within the water systems. And, that's how we can tell from the fish in, for example, grassy narrows, on how high their mercury levels are, and that tells us directly of how unhealthy the water is there. And so we need to like listen to those things and know where.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, Makaśa, you mentioned something there that I really wanted to highlight. Then you also said at the beginning to also pay attention to ourselves. And I just wanted to pick up on that, because that's the other big difference, is that many Western approaches teach you to be an objective observer. And the other Indigenous practice for connection is when we monitor that water, that we're looking at we take a time or we take a little moment to also monitor ourselves and monitor our inner waters and monitor how we're doing, so that we are seeing ourselves again in relationship to the water as well. But I almost forgot to mention that until you said that, so thank you.
Yeah, our teaching is like our veins that are in our hands, and you can see that mine are blue, and our blood and our veins are blue when they're in their body. And so this is like a map, and like how the waterways are around us, and that it travels and brings life to our entire body, and like where we can be our mini Mother Earths. And that's how we can tell, because you can tell in people, like when their blood is unhealthy, their entire body gets sick. And when their water is unhealthy in their body, then the brain is not functioning well, then your body isn't functioning well, then you swell up, then all of these different things happen. And that's really how Mother Earth is right now, is that she's very unhealthy. Her waterways and veins are very clogged by dams, and polluted by oil, and high levels of different, pollution all over the world. And so there's this, I've heard from time and time again from elders that that Mother Earth is sick, and it's really how it is, and we can think of how we can work together and creating a better Earth, better Mother Earth. And it's not really an Indigenous issue either. It's all of our issues. In Canada, the water crisis isn't just a little section in Canada where, Indigenous people don't have access to clean drinking water, so that's their problem. It's everybody's issue. If you're benefiting from and on Indigenous lands, then you're benefiting from those lands. So you have a responsibility to take action and to be an ally and to help. I wanted to ask Judy, what message would you want the international water community to hear, act on from today's panel?
I guess the main message I would say is like we're all in this world together, and like the biggest threat to our water in the world is industry. It's resource extraction and like all out rampant destruction of forests, which is like the one that creates water. So it's like it's a natural cycle in the earth. I know I think we met when we went to Six Nations one time. We met a lady from Arizona. She's Apache woman, young woman. She said that the plants, the animals of the earth are really smart, and they know how to survive because they've been here like for thousands of years, and they can adapt to the destruction of the earth. And I think one of the things she said was the bees. You know how they keep saying the bees are dying and all this. She said, well, that's the domesticated bees. These are like manufactured bees that make like honey. But she said the indigenous bees, which are like for each homeland, there's like these indigenous animals. She said they know how to survive. They know when there's danger, they get away from danger. And I guess like you understand that like when a tsunami is gonna happen or whatever, that the animals leave. They know to get away from there. So I guess it's like us sharing this planet is being able to say, let's be smarter for the planet. How we use Mother Earth, how we, like the future engineers, the future doctors, or people that are going to be working on infrastructure in the earth, think smart about it. Like start using hemp instead of the trees. Hemp grows faster. Straw grows faster. It's just like rethinking how we think, how we use the earth, because ultimately when we do use the earth, it goes to water. Like we use water to manufacture all these things. And so I guess that's my kind of message to everybody, is like, wherever you are on this planet, let's think better for Mother Earth. And it just makes me kind of eat my words at the same time, because I'm on this intercom, or whatever you call this thing, where we're globally watching each other, and how amazing humans are to connect. And I think we're in a really powerful time also to be able to listen to each other and share ideas by using this magical Zoom or whatever you call it. Like it's so amazing, and it baffles my mind, how it works. So it's just, at the same time, it's like we're very adaptable human beings, but also we gotta be really smart about the next 20 generations ahead, not just like 7, maybe like thinking like 1,000 years ahead. What are we gonna leave for these children?
Mhm. I think that leads me into the second question, is how can we help not only Indigenous communities, but Dr. Don Martin Hill, I'd like to ask you, what do you need most from allies, funders, or international institutions to support Indigenous water leadership?
So what the work I do is stunning in the fact that this is something the government should be doing. I have to write grants, secure postdocs and grad students, fund them to essentially do what this government should be doing. We're trying to develop a research environmental institute with land-based training, because our generation of engineers, and I work closely with biologists, engineers, medical folks, they are not exposed to Indigenous knowledge or ways of knowing. And so when I get them, it's like boot camp. I have to put them through, and it's not fair to them. It's not fair to our people that our time is spent doing that. If they had training right from the beginning on Indigenous ways of knowing, traditional ecological knowledge. Because when our elders, such as Judy and many others, get together with scientists, they're not in conflict anymore, because science is starting to figure a few things out. Like, we're all related, we're a web of life. What happens over here is going to affect what happens over there. And so the tar sands, is creating climate change. I was fighting the tar sands and oil development in Alberta in 1990 with the Lubicon Cree Nation, who had taken on that issue. So we see what's happening and what's coming our way. So people who think they're disconnected, and even the concept of water, when I talk to elders, they have a very hard time. Water's everything. So when you say, I'm just going to get a grant or study water, no, my teams are wholly interdisciplinary. They are elders leading the research, working with scientists, developing concepts and what to look at and what's a priority. And now, we don't train people to think in a paradigm that is more sustainable. They just talk about sustainable development goals. We've been doing those for a millennia. So we need to lead research. We need to have our own institutes and our own training, because learning about the way that they're teaching at universities is not how, as Judy pointed out, the way we think about. It's all related. So you have to look at what Tina said, the birds, all of these things are indicators and metrics. So we need a new paradigm, an Indigenous one. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report that came back and said Indigenous people are holding 80% of the world's biodiversity. I mean, that's just data speaking. Like, all they do is look at countries' data around the world, and they found the healthiest water, the healthiest places on the planet with the most biodiverse are run and managed by Indigenous people. Yet where are we in that research world, right? I'm struggling daily to, find funds for elders. And, we do this kind of in isolation, and I know Tina does as well. And then Judy had to create her own allyship in order to get mercury poisoning on the national table. So I think it's partly we're invisible to places like the UN, Geneva. You get chiefs that go up there and, talk. I mean, the women are on the ground actually doing it, right? And so this political narrative that they do is not helpful. They need to look at who's actually on the ground making change, improving the water, changing, training, and begin supporting Indigenous knowledge, or what you call traditional ecological knowledge. So we need that support. And right now, if I apply to one agency, they're like, oh, that's engineering. You can't have an engineer on your team. Like, that's so maddening, the way that they have shaped intellectual production in the West. So our people need to be supported to do what we do. Conservation groups, they don't work with us. It's our land that they're saying they're conserving, but they don't work with us. So there needs to be a real shift and pressure on governments from our allies to begin investing in Indigenous ways of knowing and people, and just take a step back and see what we can do, because honestly, the data has spoken. We do better. And those places that are doing better, that are managing their own lands and waters, are doing it with no funding. And they're doing better than the World Wildlife Foundation. They're doing better than these other agencies. So investing in Indigenous people is investing in the planet. That would be my message. We need to be invested, and we have to support the work that people are doing on the ground, which is what Tina does, what I do. Many women across the country and the globe are on the front lines, and we're alone, right? And then the chiefs and kind of the pomp and ceremony stuff happens, and that's who they're listening to, but the women are kind of left to fend for themselves. So I think making sure women's voices, like you've done, Makaśa, is incredibly important, because from what I've witnessed over 30 years, it's Indigenous women who have been on the ground, making the change, championing our rights. And then those who go to the centers of power generally aren't doing those things. So I would just say investing in women, investing in our youth, and letting us lead the research, design, and mitigation of climate change and so on. You would see different and innovative outcomes. Be my message.
Tina, would you like to build on that?
I just love listening to Dawn talk about that. And again, I agree. And if we understand the nature of colonialism, right? Colonialism is obviously racist, but it's also misogynist. It's also patriarchal. And so when we're tracing, again, coming back to that tracing of the mindset of entitlement and extraction, that sits within this idea of domination, of dominus, of the man of the house. If that's the meaning of those terms. And so understanding that colonial extractive mindset sits within this patriarchal paradigm, then that means that the counterpart to that must be an elevation of matriarchal approaches and an acknowledgement of the deep relationship between women and water as well. And so absolutely agree with Dawn on that. One of the things, if you ask what is it that I that we would like from allies, one of the interesting aspects of racism, which I also work in the field of racism necessarily for doing Indigenous environmental work, one of the aspects of racism, anti-Indigenous racism or colonial racism, is that it is economically underpinned. And this comes with a particular level of anxiety from the general public around addressing anti-Indigenous racism, and that colonial anxiety rests around things like land back. They're generally morbidly afraid that what colonizers have done to us, we will do back to them. And so there's this real strong anxiety which inhibits the approach to addressing anti-Indigenous racism. And so we're so often left as the last part of the problem to look at. And often people talk about, oh yes, well, decolonizing is a nice thing, but that's not really what's necessary now. They minimize the importance of decolonization. Colonial mindsets are the driver of extractive mindsets. And so, I think we really need to get real about if you really are here to decolonize, you need to start addressing how power operates in relation to Indigenous peoples. That means we need you to vote for political candidates who are explicit about their support of Indigenous peoples. We need to start having and working towards political authority for Indigenous peoples and their lands. And I have to say, if you're interested in traditional knowledge or Indigenous knowledge and practices in relation to water, but you are not interested in the restoration of political authority for Indigenous peoples in relation to their water, then that too is another form of extraction. Because we have the longest standing relationship to those waters. Which means that it's obviously we hold benefits, but our knowledge creates benefits in that space. But quite separate to that, it's still an enduring crime that we do not have political authority over that water. And so I guess it's join us, politically join us, and think beyond any kind of colonial anxiety and move towards supporting in the restoration of justice in the form of Indigenous authority over our waterways.
Thank you. So it's extremely important to help on all aspects, and not just donating some money, but also donating time and energy. And it's not a life. I mean, it is a lifelong commitment to making sure that our voices are heard, and that you can try to do everything that you can in your power to be a good ally. And I think there are definitely a lot of examples of great allies, and there's also a lot of great things that can be helped with, and great initiatives that are happening all over Turtle Island. And there's a lot of things that could be helped with. And but yes, politically is super important, that our sovereignty is seen, and that our voices are heard, and that that we are treated as a sovereignty people. We're not Canada's Indigenous people. We are literally have treaties with Canada. We have treaties with each other before Canada existed. We are our whole people as ourselves, and we need to be treated as such. And that's not just from here in Canada, but all over, to all Indigenous peoples, because we have all existed in these lands way before Columbus or Cook came to the islands. We were here, and so we need to be treated as such, not only and politically and everywhere, and in everyday life. And so I think once that mindset is shifted, then you can truly treat us on how we deserve to be treated. And I hope Canada can do that. And Mark Carney. So yeah, I think we are over 9 a.m. and I just want to make some time for any kind of questions, and maybe if there's like a one question per person, then we can do that and get through it in the timely manner. So if you have any questions for somebody,
There were a few questions in the chat, so maybe I can take the first one, and then others who want to jump in. I see a lot of hands raised already, so maybe I'll ask the first one from the chat, and then we can take Susanna after. So there was a question quite early on from David. All speakers have outlined the main challenges that you face. And then that also links to another question that was asked a bit later. What are the means or mode of communications and channels that are used to influence the change? What can we do as journalists and communicators here in this room to support and to emphasize your fights and to support you? So that I kind of bundle two questions together. And then Susanna will take your question.
So
yeah, go ahead. I think maybe just whoever would like to answer and feels most comfortable.
So I mean, I kind of outlined the goals and aspirations, let's say of Judy, who's been trying to get, mercury poisoning healthcare in her community. And if you read anything on Grassy Narrows, it was well documented by a Japanese team. They're still fighting for that healthcare. So raising that issue to an international level pressures governments and local leaders, politicians to take these issues and matters seriously and provide the proper care that this community, who was terribly poisoned for decades, and with no help in terms of the damage they've done to wildlife around Grassy Narrows, but especially human life. So I think it's one is educating yourself, doing the homework and building your knowledge base, because it's not hard. We have Google. You can go online and find literally absolutely everything and anything. There's so much battling going on. I've published quite a few articles in academic journals and so forth, but we do newsletters. We have a website. We did the podcast that Makaśa ran. Like we're doing our part. We're doing everything we can to get our aspirations out there. I want a research institute. Like I can do this. I built the Indigenous Studies program. I started the Six Nations Polytechnic in the community, and they are ready to take the next step. They can't hold a grant because they don't have faculty. So I need to create now mechanisms and build infrastructure so that we can hold our own research and we can conduct our own ways of monitoring and improving our water. So it's looking at new paradigms and shifts, creating pathways for access to resources, that we don't have to bend ourselves and contort ourselves to try to fit this mold or that mold. Just supporting Indigenous knowledge would be a huge win on our end, because we need to lead that. Only Indigenous people can lead that. So I think it's investing in, like they know how to invest in corporations and companies. It's time to maybe start investing in Indigenous people and their aspirations, because the government certainly isn't. Pressuring the government, how you vote, who do you let into those spaces of power? Who do you invite to be keynotes? It's generally not Indigenous people. And it doesn't have to be an Indigenous event, because we have all the skill sets, PhDs, law degrees, we have it all. We publish books, we're doing it all, and we're still invisible. And so changing that by inclusion, giving us a seat at the table, doing your homework would be a huge step in the right direction. But we can't like hold your hand and spoon feed to say this is, because I've done that for 30 years and I can't do it anymore. I'm an emeritus. I just can't do it anymore because I got to build the infrastructure in my community. We need a waste treatment plant. We need infrastructure to pipe in clean water into the homes. We need a lot. And we're one of the wealthier, more urban reserves in Canada. So imagine what smaller northern communities are going through, like Judy or the Lubicon, or people who've never even had access to any water in their homes, such as the Lubicon, which are sitting near the tar sands. They should be billionaires. And yet there they are, living a life that is incredibly tough with no running water in their homes. So, educate yourself. I've written a book on the Lubicon. Like we're out there. If you look, educate yourself and begin, advancing the issues we put forward, because we all have our issues we put forward very clearly and succinctly. But it's like nobody, your audience, it's just your own, it's Tina and others who are fighting the same battle. We do what we can. I show up when when the Maori are at the UN and struggling for their ocean, we show up. We drive the 8 hours just to give them the moral support. Or when Judy is, protesting and afraid of what might happen, the fear of the violence they might, we shouldn't have to live that way in our own homeland, because there are no Mohawks anywhere else in the world. We're it, right? This is our homeland. That fundamental fact seems to escape so many people's minds. If our people die, we cease to exist on this planet. So, and yet, we're up against a lot and doing it alone. So I think if we can, with little resources we have, support the Maori, we can support Grassy Narrows. Certainly those who are more privileged, who access more power, more authority spaces, they certainly could do a small fraction of what we are required to do on a daily basis. That's my thoughts.
Thanks
Yeah.
a lot, Dawn.
Tina, I'm going to take that one on.
I'm going to start hating going after you, Dawn. I'm going to need to start speaking because you don't leave anything behind. You've kind of covered it all so well. I would say, one of the things that we do say is that the battlegrounds are everywhere. And so they are right actually physically on your river or on your coastline, or as Dawn said, sometimes 250 nautical miles off our coastline. Then that can be there's the battleground that's there as well, directly in the face of the oppressor, and the front line. And then there are, of course, lobbying at local government, and then there's central government, and there's also the United Nations and our transnational spaces and our gatherings where we come together in those projects. And all of those things are opportunities for, particularly if you're looking at, media or journalism, all of those spaces are opportunities to amplify what is happening with Indigenous peoples and our waterways. And so you can take the time out to find out what is going on at those different levels, what's going on locally for me and the Indigenous peoples, for the place that I'm at, and grow that relationship with them. Because when you grow that relationship with with the Indigenous peoples of the lands that you're on, you're growing a relationship with the water by virtue of that as well. So, getting in contact with them and understanding also, what it is that they need from that space, and amplifying their voice, amplifying also their successes. So absolutely, Dawn is, worked with so many different Indigenous communities around the world with their water projects and their different approaches to it. So many amazing inspirational stories. So not just highlighting our struggles and the colonial harm, although that is important, but also amplifying and celebrating and smashing down colonial norms and building up Indigenous norms of our relationship and our successes and our strengths and the wonderful things that we're doing in relation to water as well. So celebrating the good things, highlighting and amplifying the colonial harm as well, and doing that from all levels, from the United Nations level, not that it's hierarchy, because actually for us the most important space is on the ground, on the front line, but at all of those levels, from the front line, local government, national government, regionally, transnationally as well, are all opportunities for you to amplify the story.
Cecile, what is the next question?
I think we can take Susanna and then Humna to ask their questions live, and then we have other so many questions in the chat as well. So I can take that if there is time after that. But Susanna, go for it.
Good morning. Latsukamatli Wopila to all of you. My name is Susana Sandoval. My name is Teocinto Cataatal. That's my name. And I am Purepecha, which is Mexican descent. I'm one of the tribal nations of Mexican descent that lives in what's known as North America. I'm also a Lakota sun dancer. So I'm greeting you from the shores of Lake Michigan in Chicago. My spiritual grandfather, while we were at Standing Rock at Cannibal, North Dakota, asked me, once he passed away, we're in the 4th year after his transition, his physical transition into the ancestral world, to speak to women in particular about doing more water ceremonies, not just for us privately, but also for the public. It is something that we have embraced over the years. There are many grandmothers who have come before me that know these ceremonies publicly, have done this type of work, but also that is a work that needs to happen in a world that has been colonized and where our ceremonies have been considered to be pagan rituals instead of being one in nature. And so I would encourage us all to do gatherings at bodies of water and share each other's ceremonies, because many cultures have, not just one culture, but many indigenous peoples of all cultures have had different water rituals to respect the percentage of water that is part of our composition entirely. I would say that even the United Nations, I'm in my 8th year as a human rights commissioner, has issues with allowing us to be free in doing those ceremonies publicly. We're very good at going to wine and cheese receptions, and meeting with donors, and even gathering in a public way with others in the rooms of the halls of the United Nations headquarters in New York, but we don't, or rarely see us gather in our own ways, as the elders would say. I apologize to the elders who I spoke before, but I am grateful for having that opportunity to do that. And as an organizer, I would ask us to organize ourselves, not wait till others come to us with the actual resources. We have abundance amongst us, and sometimes the money just dirties the process. And so let us not wait until that comes. I've also spent many years. I think that's also what's happening right now with the nonprofit sector, and is that the work that's being done and how we become recognized. Let us not wait for others to recognize the work that we do. And then the last thing I would like to leave us with is just really gratitude for all of us that are doing this work without that type of recognition, knowing that in our hearts, the work that we do on a daily basis that doesn't get seen, the work that we do with ourselves, in order to keep our own water focused on the goodness and the peacefulness that's inside of all of us. That is the work that needs to be done.
Thank you for your words. Yeah, I definitely agree that we can make space for more water-related ceremonies, and being able to see and bring that space of collectively seeing water as a spirit or something that we need to take care of and speak to kindly and burn tobacco for and speak for, and have those spaces not only within community but within like you said, maybe maybe United Nations, maybe World Water Week, and creating those spaces where we can connect globally with each other and really recognize the water for what it is, which is like a spirit entity and something like, and that we can all relate to, really, but bringing us closer together spiritually. Hannah, did you have a question?
Can I go?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for all your effort and for all. I loved what everyone was talking about. I loved Makasa's metaphor for, the water in our veins, and I loved what Tina said about, matriarchy and how we need to put more women and acknowledge more work that our women are doing. My question is more like an observation that I've experienced in my years of expertise in the climate and water and nature-based solutions sector. So basically what I've noticed is that nature-based solutions, techniques, and all practices just like a white-voiced version of what we indigenous peoples have used for centuries, and I think that it's blatant disrespect for cultures and traditions that have helped the planet thrive. And now that we are on the brink of the sixth mass extinction, they're just rebranding our ways and giving them whitewashed and white people names, and it makes me just so angry because we have been saying it all along that our practices and our traditions and our culture, they're actually for the benefit of the planet, but the greed never listened to us. So I would just really like to hear what the speakers have to say about that. Thank you. By the way, just to introduce, I'm sorry, I forgot, I'm Hamna Fayaz from Pakistan, and I come from also an indigenous culture, but on the Indus Basin. And in my culture, it's mainly the same traditions that the Mohawks or the First Nations of America and Australia and New Zealand, it's the same thing. Water is considered as a sacred entity, and we really respect it, and all our rivers are named after, they're called Mother this or Mother Meghna or Mother Indus. So yeah, I really enjoyed all the talk today. Thank you.
So maybe, I don't know if Judy's still here, but I'm wondering if she could respond.
Was that a question? What was the question?
You want to rephrase your question, Hannah?
Yeah, sure. It was just I just wanted to know your view, the speaker's view on how they see that whether the nature-based solutions, what they view it as, and because in my experience over the years, I think that nature-based solution is just a whitewashed version of our practices and our traditions and our culture, and I find it very disrespectful that they won't give us the credit for for our culture and for our traditions. Even now, they're just naming it a white people name. They're just giving these practices that we have lived with for centuries and that have made the earth thrive for centuries, and now that we are on the brink of sixth mass extinction, they're still not giving us the right and due full credit. So what are your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Makaśa, can you simplify it for me?
Or maybe
Just asking.
Maybe I'll take a shot and then you, because I know that you've addressed this, but again, it's with traditional ecological knowledge, like there's indigenous knowledge, which has one definition. That's who we are in our language, where Judy lives, the lifestyle for millennia. We're not trying to explain ourselves to anyone. We just are. And this needs to thrive because we're losing that, because we're losing our language and our land. So investing in indigenous knowledge is not happening. What is happening in Canada, there's this thing called two-eyed seeing. I don't even want to start. We've always had that, so I don't know why it's a new thing. But whenever it decenters indigenous knowledge and includes Western knowledge, there's this thing that happens where they just reinvent it and call it something else. In this case, it's traditional ecological knowledge, and then take ownership of it. So intellectual appropriation has been happening since that's part of colonialism. So if you look at the US pharmacopoeia, 90% of it is indigenous medicines that we use, that they then take the patent and then, claim it as their, and then get the resources from that. So it's about appropriating and then whitewashing what we're doing. That is a fear, because it is happening in Canada, where if you want to get a grant, you have to include traditional ecological knowledge or Indigenous people. So they minimize it the best they can to still do exactly what they want to do. But now I got to have a few natives on my grant in order to get it. So, and I think Judy knows a lot about that process. So good intentions going awry is colonialism 101, right? Just like, oh, we're going to help the natives. And then they're going to take that issue over and rework it to fit their value system, and then try to give it back to us in a course at a university. So I think that's Judy. We talked a bit about this issue of intellectual extraction, which is what people think could happen quite easily in this era of, oh, let's work with Indigenous knowledge. So that's why I was thinking of you, because the dangers that can pose. Instead of really wanting to listen to just what we have to say, we can't just be.
Yeah, I experienced that on many different levels, and it's always good to make them recognize what they're doing and what they're saying, and not be afraid to have your voice heard and listened to, because and speak up about that when it's happening, when extraction is happening on either a bigger level or individual level. Some, like, it happens all the time that either conservations or projects needs an Indigenous person to be on their project, and they have no voice on where the project is going, or they're the last to join the project. That happens all of the time. And mostly you have to have your guard up on every single project that you're looking at, or every single person that is reaching out to you, to make sure that that is genuine. And so it's a kind of a common practice to do for Indigenous peoples to do, or Indigenous professionals, like for us to have commonly look at, where is this work going? Is this work going to benefit the community? Is my voice going to be highlighted as and be the main story, or is it just going to be a supporting, little tail end thing? Yeah.
Like, we've been tokenized, but our knowledge has been stolen. So if you look up the United States Constitution, Bill Clinton actually passed in Congress that, they did take the Great Law the Haudenosaunee had, and then remodeled it under their, like, even their symbols of the eagle, that's ours. The carrying the bows in their talons, that's ours. One bow together, easy to break. Put a confederacy united together, harder to break. They literally stole our symbolism and our philosophy without ever acknowledging where they got these ideas from, because, like, they didn't even have sports. I mean, every sport you play, the music, we've influenced all of these things, and it's always not acknowledged. Whether it's, they didn't even have teams in Europe. They had a very different way of life when they came here, and they saw people playing games and how it encouraged national health and well-being and identity. They stole that as well. So if you look at what is Canadian or what is American, you'll generally find a root of this was Indigenous, and then it was, like, lacrosse is literally in our creation story, lacrosse. And then they barred our own people. Once we gave it to them, they barred us from playing lacrosse. And Canada made it its national sport. So it's just a continuum of extracting Indigenous ways of being or knowing. And today now it's environment is the big thing. but not acknowledging where the source of that or allowing Indigenous people to lead. And it's frustrating to watch. And every time an ally makes an offer, you get nervous. Like, are they just going to steal what we like? You don't.
Yeah. When you look at Canada, we're everywhere but nowhere at the same time. Our is nowhere to be seen. Our presence is nowhere to be seen, but everything is ours, from the medicines to the government system to the sports to everything that is Canadian or even American, and because we're in both areas. So yeah, we won't see us in, commercials, and it's part of the Indigenous erasure. But everything is essentially Indigenous, coming from
Food, the medicine, everything. I think
Tina, even holidays like Thanksgiving,
kayaks, canoes, goggles. I mean, we're going to teach a whole course on contributions to agriculture and irrigation systems. Like, it goes on and on. Which is why educating yourself is so important before you start working with Indigenous people, to know boundaries. And that's why pedagogy, or teaching and training young people, is so important, how to work together, and that there's boundaries. There's things that, Indigenous people only can talk about, but we are afraid of intellectual property theft, which has been an ongoing issue, part of colonialism.
Well, thank you. I think that we're going to end off our panel, and I'd just like to take the time to thank each of you for sharing your voices and sharing your minds. And it's really amazing of what everyone on this panel is doing in their every single day life, and has dedicated their lifelong work to. And it doesn't go unrecognized. And I just like to say thank you and Yahweh from the bottom of my heart for our listeners, for your voices to be heard. And I'm glad that the listeners are able to take in what they could and hopefully apply it into their everyday life, and learned a lot of new things today on this panel. So Yahweh, Cecile, I'll pass it along to you.
Yes, and I really want to second this big thank you to everyone, to Dawn, Tina, Judy, and you, Makaśa, for making this conversation happening. Really appreciate all your insight. I really appreciate all the insights from participants as well. I'm sorry we're running a little bit over time. I would encourage you to follow up on the conversations in the WhatsApp chat that I shared earlier. Will be shared by email again. There's so many comments. It was really hard to catch up, but hopefully we can keep the conversations going. I want to thank the Grundfos Foundation for making this program happen. And then don't forget to submit your story. If you have something to share about Indigenous knowledge, how you want to include Indigenous participation in your work, you can definitely submit this story for the August 14th session. Again, we'll share more information via email. And join us on Thursday for the 6th session. That would be a workshop with Data Fight, and we will go into investigative journalism and how to bridge data with storytelling to make change happen and to influence decision makers. So don't miss that. Same time, same link. And on this note, thanks again, everyone. Feel free to share your comments, your reflections, your suggestions via email after this session. Thanks, Makaśa. Thanks, Dawn. Thanks, Tina. And thanks, Judy. And thanks, everyone. And thanks to the interpreters for making this, making us understand each other today.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Anna.
Thank you. Goodbye.